Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with the Coaches. I am Holly. Hi, Kim.
Morning.
Welcome to Coffee with the Coaches. I am Holly. For those of you who have not joined us before, welcome. And I'm the RN Health Coach here at Lenovo in North Carolina. And joining me is my lovely co-host, Kimberly Grady, who is also an RN Health Coach, and she is based in Chicago, serving Chicago and Santa Clara, and whoever else might want to join her in health coaching. Today, we're excited to be talking about boundaries. It's kind of a scary word, right? A little bit scary. And I think for me, before, I was doing research for this, it's really interesting. I've learned a lot reading about it, because we learn a lot about skills, right? So we're always teaching new skills, whether it's habits and goals and managing stress and that sort of thing. And we always think about boundaries around the holidays, and we should have boundaries, but it's hard, right? And we don't think, I think, of setting boundaries as a skill, right?
Definitely.
It's a skill. It's an actual skill that you have to practice. And like any sort of other skill, like a muscle and like mindfulness, if you don't practice it, you can't be good at it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is setting boundaries around, the holidays, and just kind of setting boundaries and saying no in general, because, it's a difficult time of year to say no. So we're going to throw out a poll to find out kind of where you guys are with this whole boundaries situation. Yeah.
Love it. Do you have clearly defined boundaries?
Oh, yeah.
I love that answer. I have them, but I don't tell anyone.
Right? I think that's legit. I'll be really curious to see what the answers come out, how those answers come out, right? Because I know for a fact that some people I talk to are like, I can't say no. I just have a really difficult time saying no. And then there's other people who are like, oh yeah, who cares? I say no to everything. And then there's just the in-between people who's like, yeah, I know what my boundaries are, but I have a difficult time either defining. It's either I have a difficult time defining them, or I have a difficult time expressing to people what they are, or how to express what they are.
Yep. Well, and this is a skill that most people are not taught. Like, you're not taught this growing up. Most people aren't taught this in their homes. So it's something that we do as adults, which can obviously be a struggle if you've grown up your whole life and gone your whole adult life not doing this. And then lo and behold, you now have to do it. It can be scary. It can be really scary to tell people no and feel like they might not be supportive of you going forwards.
And look at that.
Most people love that answer.
Right? I just don't tell anyone. So that's really interesting. And so please share with us maybe some of the reasons why you don't tell people about your boundaries, or, what are some of the reasons that you do, or, let us know. Keep us, in on the conversation, because I want to get your feedback on what that looks like for you guys. One of the things, Kim, that you just said is about growing up. And, if you weren't brought up, or if you were brought up, let's just say, to, do bidding for other people and constantly give and be that person to be the do all and the end all, then it's really difficult to know what your boundaries are or how to express them. So it's a tool that, as children, they should be taught boundaries. And I didn't actually think about that. I mean, I have 2 small children, and I'm constantly telling them what to do, right? Because that's what we do as parents. We think that we're doing the right thing, and we're like, no, you don't actually have a choice. You just have to do it. So that was actually really valuable for me in coming into this session today. It was just like, oh my goodness, I need to let them have their own boundaries so that they can grow up knowing that that's a skill and a tool that they have to utilize. One of the most important things that I learned as well is that it is the most important part of self-care, right? So setting boundaries isn't a negative thing. While we can't control how people react to us setting boundaries, it is really the number one form of self-care. And boundaries come in lots of different forms. So we have physical boundaries, right? This is my space. Right now we have a 6-foot boundary,
Mhm.
right? But we have emotional boundaries, we have spiritual boundaries. I mean, there's boundaries with all kinds of things. And I think um, it's really important to recognize what your boundaries are. And or probably from what I have been reading, one of the most important ways to do that is you have to really kind of be in tune with yourself, right? You have to know what is your comfort level. So if you start thinking about different situations or questions or, whatever that might be, whether it's work related, personal related, holiday related, if you sit in the pocket of how that makes you feel, does it make you feel uncomfortable? Does it make you feel stressed? That is a boundary, right? So that's when you know that you have to set a boundary around that particular situation or topic or holiday or whatever. So I thought that was really interesting because do you feel resentment towards the person or the situation? And do you feel discomfort? Like, that's a great tool to have in recognizing where your boundaries are,
Yeah.
right?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that boundaries start with internal dialogue. Like you first need to sit down, me, myself, and I, and tell yourself, like, what brings me joy? And I think that's a difficult conversation for people to have with themselves a lot of the time because they're so worried about pleasing other people or their kids or their husband or their boss or their families. And it's really hard to sit down and say, okay, like what makes me happy this holiday season? Or what do I need to make sure I show up as my best self? So giving yourself that time to journal or to practice mindfulness or to exercise, like whatever, like I get some of my best thinking when I'm at the gym and I come home and I'm like, okay, great. Like I have all these great ideas. I know what I want to do. My life is clear. My life is organized. For some people, that's while they're reading a book or while they take a long hot shower or, when they make themselves a cup of coffee in the morning. So I think having that internal dialogue, you can't set boundaries without that. If you don't know what makes you happy, if you don't know what makes you tick, if you don't know what makes you frustrated, you can't set those boundaries. And I think we talk about that with self-awareness, and you talked about that as well, Holly. Like like I carry my tension in my neck and my shoulders. When I get stressed, I can like feel myself start to turtle. Like I can just like, like I don't,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't feel good, but I feel tension. I feel resistance. So being in tune with that,
Mm-hmm.
I think is a big part of that. So you can say like, okay, like this is uncomfortable for me. Like we
Yep.
talked about this with, everybody in Thanksgiving. If your family said like, oh, well, let's have everybody over, and you were like, ooh, I don't, not comfortable with that. And
Right.
it's hard to turn that down. You haven't seen these people in probably 6 to 9 months. So how do you put that boundary in place so everybody's happy, which I think is also hard because you want everybody to be happy. You don't want to disappoint anybody.
Well, and
Um,
I think that's part of the issue why people don't. And someone said, I don't tell people my boundaries because sometimes they feel selfish, and I always want to be the giver. And I think that's, I've heard that from a lot of people. And I think we have to recognize that self-care isn't selfish, right? It's self-love. And even if when we set a boundary, the other parties don't react the way we would like them to react, I think we have to understand that we can't control their reactions.
yep.
You know, it's hard to do that, but it's better self-love and it's better self-care. You'll be a better person because of it. And I think it's important from that perspective too, is that if all of us understand that we all have boundaries. So when you set a boundary to somebody else, that might be actually giving them the idea that, hey, maybe I can say no to something. And hopefully they will understand, and how you say that you're setting your boundary matters, right?
Tone of voice is
Like,
huge.
I am not doing that this year, and your attitude, that matters too. But I did read, there's a, along with that tool and listening and being aware of your internal dialogue, Kim, like you were saying in your body, um, on a scale of 1 to 10, of the discomfort and the stress that a situation gives you, if your discomfort is a 6 or higher, a 6 to 10, then that is your gauge for that's a boundary for me. I need to learn to express what I need from this situation or don't need from this situation. But that's your gauge. So anytime that you're faced with a decision to make or an obligation, then you say to yourself, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I feel super resentful about the thought of even going forward with this or doing it. It just stresses me out. And you're a 7, then that's when you should start thinking about, okay, I need a boundary here. What is that boundary going to be? And I think another important point of when we set boundaries are flexible, right? Just because this year you can't add one more thing to your list or you can't travel and they don't agree with you, that doesn't mean next year you're not going to, right? They're ever changing, right? Self-care and self-love is changing. You're changing as a human. And so it's flexible and it's not always set in stone. So, I think we have to remind people of that. Just like, you know what, that's not really good for me right now.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a really good thing for people to remember. Like boundaries aren't brick walls. Like I kind of tend to look at them as like a picket fence. Like you can go through
Yeah,
them, you can kind of go over, you can go around, they can change, like everything else in life. And I think we've talked about this a lot, but the only constant in life is change. Things are always changing. Things are never going to be the same.
yeah,
They're always going to change. That's personalities, that's jobs, that's weather. I mean, that's everything. So
yeah,
taking that into account when you are setting boundaries and when people are setting boundaries with you, and like being comfortable with that, asking clarifying questions, like
hmm,
just having a really good positive mindset, knowing that it's hard for people to do this. So having an open mind and saying like, hey, like I really appreciate you expressing that. If you don't understand, then say something like, hey, I don't really understand. Can you help me clarify like what you're asking me to do or what you want to do? It's
yeah,
okay to ask clarifying questions. You don't just have to take it at
yeah,
face value and be like, okay, that's done.
yeah,
One of the quotes I came across when looking at boundary setting articles in the last couple weeks was that, quote, givers need to set limits because takers rarely do.
yeah.
So if you think about like the people that are always
Right.
like jumping on the bandwagon, or like,
Yeah,
people that you're like, ah, I wish they did some work, or I wish that they brought
yeah,
something to the party, like those
yeah.
people aren't going to set boundaries. And the people that give you the pushback
Good.
are probably the people that have been taking advantage of you. Maybe not on purpose, maybe not maliciously. They're
Yeah,
probably not like out to kill you, and they're not like an evil villain in the story, but like they're probably benefiting from you doing
100%.
for them. So
100%. Yeah, 100%. I love that. The takers. And honestly, I think, and that really is a negative connotation. And I guess, I should be careful about that because some people I think just don't recognize that they're takers,
exactly.
right? And it's not by fault of their own. I think it's not recognizing, it's not being in tune with,
Right.
you and being self-aware. And I think sometimes we can help those type of people with our response with our boundaries. And again, I read, this is a really cool thing too. It says, you can simultaneously set boundaries and be loving, compassionate, and kind. You can sit with your loved one's pain or, disagreement, hold space for their reaction, and still reiterate how much they mean to you, all while making clear that your boundary is non-negotiable.
And it's
Right?
tough. And I've had a ton of these conversations, being that we're going to be new parents and trying to tell people, no, we're not having visitors over for Christmas. That's 2 weeks before my due date. Like, I'd really rather not have my exposure through the roof. And like, that's really
Yeah.
hard. I come from a big Italian family, short in stature, big in size. number size. That could be misconstrued a couple ways. There's a lot of us. But telling people like, no, we're not having visitors, like we're not going anywhere, like that's really hard. They're used to, flocking to people and being around for the holidays. And
yeah,
it's not that I don't love them any less. It's not that I don't want to spend time with them, but my personal comfort and our health takes precedent over that right now.
Oh,
and those are hard
100%.
conversations. And you sit and you're done with it and you're exhausted. But when you wake up the next morning, you feel better about it. You're the one that has to sit with your decision, not, like you said, you can't affect how everybody else takes your decisions or takes your statements. That's on them. You can't control how anybody feels.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you come home to yourself and you're the one that has to live with that decision.
100%, 100%. And it is hard for people who are natural empaths, and it's hard for people who are just natural caretakers. And that goes for both women and men. So I think, when we take care of ourselves, that's really an act of taking care of others, right? And we see that every single day. I know when I don't have self-care, my family suffers, and I don't mean suffers like physically, mentally, whatever, but I can't care for them the way I would like to, or give them what they need from me too, right? Because I have little ones. They need mom. They need me to be up and at them and giving and loving and parenty and all of those things. But if I'm really not caring for myself and setting boundaries between me and them, and you and I sort of touched on this the other day, I can't be I can't be a good parent either, right? So Kim and I talked about, very briefly, Kim said something to me. I'm like, something about I needed space from my kids, and I need time away from my kids. And she's like, that's not a bad thing to say, because you do feel guilty. I'm like, I love them, but I need to get away from them, like, right? But it's okay, because that just means I need me time. I need, everybody needs that kind of time. And whether it's away from your kids or away from work or away from your family at the holidays, we all need that, and it's okay. And I do recognize that that's okay, because I'm always a better parent when I take time for myself. One of the things I really wanted to share with everybody is that how do you verbalize no, right? How do you say no?
I have a really fun poll for this.
Oh, yay. I'm excited. Right? Because that is the biggest challenge, right? So once we identify your boundaries, once you know where you're sitting in that discomfort zone, how do you say no? Oh, I love it.
All right. So quick poll. Can you say no? Oh yeah, no problem. Like, no is my favorite word. No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
Most of the time, hardly, or I really struggle with this.
But have you noticed over the years, and this is what I've noticed about no, I've always been really good about saying no. I have a strong personality, and I don't think that's a fault. But when I was younger, my no came across as a bit aggressive, right? It was like, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that, right? Whereas as I've aged, and my wisdom, my years of experience and education have taught me it's all about your communication style and how you approach the no, which will be how people interpret it and how they react to it.
Agreed. Right? So small percentage of people are really familiar with the no. Most of the time is pretty much the majority, and then we're split between hardly ever and I really struggle.
Yeah, that's a quarter of people. I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot.
Something that I read, oh my God, everything I read blends together. I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. But when my husband and I moved home from living across the country, and then like the family dynamics changed, I told myself, if somebody asked me to do something and I wasn't immediately telling myself, hell yeah, then it means no. If I'm not like over the top, super excited, want to do it, then I shouldn't do it. Obviously there's caveats. There's like some family things that like
100%.
You got to go to your nephew's baptism. Like there's no way around that. Like, but
oh my God, another bridal shower.
Oh God. So send a gift. Like, also, like, think about how you're going to show up to that event. If you don't want to go, people can tell. Like, when you show up and you're like dragging your heels and sitting in the corner, like by yourself, like, that's not very fun. That's not fun for you. That's not fun for anybody else. Like, and it's a difficult decision, but just
that's a good point. I really like that point. And clearly, Kim and I are not psychologists, but if you, right, we're armchair psychologists. So, right, if you do something, if you make a conscious decision to say yes or to do the thing, then bring your whole self to it, right? I think that emotionally you have to let go of some of the resentment, and if it's stressing you out, you're going to have to learn how to cope with it. Now, that sounds like hardcore, like, get over it advice. But I do think that if you're going to make the conscious decision to do something that you're uncomfortable with, that on some level you have to accept that you've accepted it as well, right? So here is the example of expressing. Now, of course, this is very, psychology. Here's the right words you should say. This is not conversational. But there's a statement that a psychologist, his name is Thomas Gordon, came up with long and ever ago, that centers your feelings and experiences and should reduce any likelihood of defensiveness to the listener. It's an I statement, and here's how it works. So there's 4 pieces to it. You say, I feel, or when you, because, and then I need. So you could say, I feel sad and overwhelmed when I come home for Christmas because there's a lot of unresolved family tension. I need to spend a peaceful Christmas on my own this year, right? So along those same lines, I think, when you don't want other people to feel bad, expressing that I really care a lot about you and love spending time with family at Christmas. This year, I need some space, or we need some space. So it sounds like you're telling them about your feelings, because, and your needs, while reiterating that you still care, right? Which I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good framework. And I think it's a really good reminder that people can't read your mind. Sure. Like, I grew up in a house that was like, my mom would always say, like, I can't read your mind. I can't hear the marbles when you shake your head. Use your words. Like, so people like to hear, I care about you. And I think it shows a level of maturity when you can say, I feel this way. You're not pointing the finger. You're not blaming anybody else. You're taking it on, which takes it off of everybody else. Now they don't feel defensive. They don't feel cornered. They don't feel like you're attacking them or the way they do things.
Yep.
Then it's more internalized. So I think it's easier for people to accept that when you're not like, your house isn't fun, so I'm not coming.
You could say that. I'm not sure how that might go over, but you have a point. And that statement, it was written a long time ago too. And what I just noticed, because you said so, when you're communicating, if you point a finger, whether it's verbally or physically, if you say, you do this, then that comes across as very blaming, right? So making it more about you and your needs and how much you appreciate and the other person or love or whatever your situation is, I think is really important in getting, your boundary firm and across without offending the other person. Now, another person or party totally might feel offended or hurt or angry or whatever, but we can't control that. Only others can control their own reactions, their own feelings. And, at the end of the day, that's all we can do, right? That's all we can do. So anyway, I thought that this was super enlightening for me, right? This whole boundary setting and learning a new skill and using the tool, right? The 1 to 10, So, if any of you have any experiences with boundary setting and how you've responded, let us know. I know Kim told me one. I'm not going to throw you under the bus here, Kim, but Kim told me one the other day about her and her mom, right? You
Yeah,
want to share?
so it's something that my mom's love language, which we've talked about 100 times, I feel like, on this series. My mom's love language is quality time. Mine is quality time alone. I love my mom to death. She's a great woman. I just don't want to spend a ton of time with her. Like I work 2 jobs. I'm getting ready to have a baby. Like I have a lot of things going on. So I had to have a really tough conversation with her. And with increased hormones, it only gets harder. So, full transparency, I cried most of the time, but it was exhausting. And I'm glad I
Yeah.
did it because now she understands, like, it's not that I don't love her, it's not that I don't want to spend time with her, but I physically
Mhm.
just I don't have the time. So my parents are both recently retired. So they're trying to find what works for them, what
Yeah.
works for everybody else. Like, I think that's difficult for people when they're taking care of their parents, like in my grandparent, like grandparents or relatives that don't work anymore and they're home all day and they want to talk to you all day and they want to spend their time with you. And you can't, like, you have to work, you have to take care of your kids, you have to do everything
Yeah.
else. So how do you
Yeah.
set those time boundaries? Like, I really enjoy spending time with you. I can give you 2 hours tonight, but then I have to go home. Like,
Mhm.
and then there's less likely to be resentment when you have to go home. It's less likely to be like, oh, well, 10 more minutes, or can you stay for 5 more minutes, or can we do this one more
100%.
thing before you go? So if you can like set those expectations up front and set those boundaries, people are going to understand going forward. And I think it's boundaries remind me a lot of like asking for help. Like a lot of people struggle with asking for help. But I think it's ironic because when we look to everybody else, we flock to people that are good at setting boundaries and are good at asking for help. Like if you think of friendships or relationships you have, most of us value those relationships where somebody can say, oh, you know what? I don't know how to do that. Can you help me fix this?
Yeah.
Or, no, I don't enjoy that activity. I don't want to go. Can we find something else? Oh, that's a really good question that came in, Holly. Do you want to
Oh,
take?
really? I
Yeah.
didn't see it. Okay, let me see. How do you tell your child you need space? I honestly, I think it's a really important tool to teach your children. Because even when mine were younger, mine are 10 and 12 now, if my husband and I were going out on a date or if I was going out with my friends, they're like, oh, but I'm going to miss you because I would not be here for bedtime. And it was the same thing when I was going to the gym frequently because I would miss supper when they were little. But that was the time that I had to go. Um, and I think it's just about being, you know what, I love you so much. And, mom needs some time to take care of herself. She has really good friends too that fill her bucket. That's always a really good analogy because, the giving tree or filling your bucket or whatever. That's my personal, advice because what you're doing is you're teaching them that quality time for you is important, right? And
And then
so
they're going to
they
value
will,
that and they'll
they
do it
will.
going
Hmm.
forwards.
Yep, because it works both ways. Whether I think it's with kids, or adults, it works both ways. You have to understand other people's boundaries, and and your children's boundaries, right? They have to understand yours. It's reciprocal, right? And if it's not, then I think you have to sit down and just reevaluate how you handle certain situations.
Right. Well, and then the odds are like coming up, they'll be more comfortable coming to you and saying, Mom, I'm overwhelmed. I need to, like be by myself, or I need to go, whatever, do a puzzle by myself or play by myself. And obviously, kids' language is different and they might say those things differently to you, but
Yeah.
then you'll be able to pick up on that and say, like, you'll be able to identify, like, hey, like you seem overwhelmed. Do you need some time by yourself? Do you need to do something that makes you happy? And that can be,
Hmm.
obviously schoolwork or
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah. So a couple of other people said, and we won't call out your names, I have trouble sticking to boundaries and self-care goals that I set for myself. I'm really great at achieving goals that others set for me at work, at home, etc. But I struggle when I'm on my own, when I'm on my own accountability buddy. Yeah, and I think that's really common. So that boundary, I think for this person is, you know, when you're doing it for yourself. So if somebody tells you, hey, here's what you need to do, but then if you say that yourself, you're just not good at keeping within the colored lines, is what it sounds like, right? And that's really hard. And that is, I think that's a skill that takes time to learn, right? That it really does take time to learn. So, you know, Kim and I are always happy to be your accountability buddy if you need it, but it's really important to do it on your own as well. So thank you for sharing that. Oh, somebody said we explain that having time alone helps us be better parents. Our kids like the idea of having a better mom and dad. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. You're right. Yeah, and that's the truth, right? Kids do love to hear that, and they do want to know that, you know, you're trying to be a better parent. So I love that. Thank you. I have to share with you before we go. We're at 11:30, but I'll share with you one where I struggle with the boundaries. Sometimes it's conversations, right? Because there's some conversations that I'm willing to have with some people. I try to avoid the typical, you know, political blah, 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 those types of, you know, argumentative conversations. I'm not argumentative. I'm happy to see your point. But if you just want to argue with me, I don't want to have a conversation with you. But I find it difficult within my family because I have a family member who likes to just get things going, just wants to bring up a point that generally none of us agree with and just find it exhausting to listen to. But because it's a family member, I find we just kind of let it go. We just sort of do one of these, we turn away, or we're just like, But now that I have immersed myself in boundary setting, I may actually say something next time something comes up. So I have learned something from this conversation today, Kim.
I support you. If you need to text me on the side, like, oh, so-and-so's at it again, I'll be like, all right, big deep breath. Tell them how they make you feel.
All right, guys, I think that's it for us today, 11:30. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee with the Coaches. This is always so much fun for us. We love having you guys here. We love sharing what we've learned. We love learning what you've learned, learning from you guys and your experiences. And so thank you. We really value you. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Oh yeah, just a reminder, on the 17th is the next Coffee with the Coaches. We are going to be doing, you know, the concept is being present for the presents, basically being present for the holiday, but we are doing a little bit on caring for the caregiver. And we are having from Bright Horizons, Colin Ahrens, who's the representative for that benefit for you guys, because we've had so much feedback on the caregiver and caring for elderly parents. And so we really want to talk to him about what the benefits that you guys have for that type of support for you and for your aging parents or dependents, whatever that looks like for you. So it's going to be a really fun one. It's right before Christmas, so we're really going to get into the Christmas spirit. Might be eggnog in here. I'm not going to promise there's not going to be eggnog in there. So please don't forget to join us for that, okay?
Thank you.
Bye.